Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me for my weekly chat with a college prep guru. This week I'm chatting with Ted Dorsey, founder of Tutor Ted, and expert on all things test prep. Welcome, Ted.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. I'm always happy to talk about test prep.
Most people are not.
That is true. Even though I get a lot of questions about test prep from families, they have lots of questions and want to know a lot of things, and so I'm always happy to cover it.
That's true. Now, to get good answers, that actually is a conversation people want to have. So, okay,
yeah.
I'll adjust my thinking. Yes, test prep is a great thing to talk about.
Definitely. Well, you're known for non-boring test prep, right? And so this should be a pretty fun conversation.
I hope so. Yeah, that's our slogan. Non-boring test prep since 2000. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah, the idea it's legitimate. It's not really a gimmick. The idea is basically our students will learn a lot more if they're actually engaged. And it doesn't mean that we're going to be sort of like clownish or, stand-up comedian-like throughout the process, but more just trying to find something that is interesting within the material. And when the material is not that interesting, making fun of it so that the student actually finds some way of just, staying present, because that's when they'll actually get learning done.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been doing this since 2000, and so what have you found during the last 17 years that students seem to struggle with the most?
Ooh, yeah. Struggle with the most. I think anxiety is a huge one. This is a high-pressure test, and we're putting students in a situation that they probably are not used to, probably have never been in before, where they've got to perform on the day of a test. And even before that, they're leading up to that and feeling the pressure of the fact that they're going to have to perform and they're going to have to, get this number that represents them supposedly. So there's a lot of stress around that. And I think that that's a big part of what we're helping our students with. Some of what we're helping them with is, some of the ways we help them with that is to soothe it directly and basically show them that this isn't something to be afraid of, that they will do well, that this is a situation that other students have kind of marched through before, and they can count on our experience to help them through it. And then another big part of it is just helping them be better at the test. Because once they start practicing and seeing the content that they're practicing showing up on the practice tests, and then improving as a result, they realize, okay, this is actually a pretty simple process, and if I do the work, I'll get better, and that's hugely anxiety relieving. So, there also is a good amount of anxiety. There's a right amount to feel, and I actually really value that, and I want our students to know that some pressure is right. That if you care, you should feel some stress, and that'll actually improve your performance. But it's the anxiety beyond that. It's the pressure of competing with your peers and trying to get the perfect score or bust. That probably is not the healthy kind of anxiety to have.
Yeah, definitely. And to throw a curveball at you, because I just thought of it, and I've been getting questions like this all the time about having students who maybe aren't as motivated through the process. Do you get students like that are maybe not as motivated? How do you handle that?
Yeah. That's a tough situation. In the worst case scenario, I've thought of myself as like the world's highest paid babysitter. So that's a situation I try to avoid if at all possible.
Yeah.
I think motivation is like maybe the most essential factor from the student's point of view. There are other things that are important too, but the cliche that always comes to mind is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And I remember one student I was sitting with, and I gave this sort of like lengty explanation of a problem, and I thought it was a pretty good explanation. And I look at her, and she just has these sort of like very sort of dead looking eyes. And she just wanted to be anywhere but that. And I finished my explanation, and she just looks at me and goes, like just shrugs, and and then I asked her point blank. I said, is this something you want to be doing right now? And she said, no, it wasn't. And we went and had a conversation with her parents at that point, because it is that important. You know what I mean? Like there's a way to do this that is a perfect waste of time. And that's not what we're interested in. Our goal is to help kids improve their chances of admission, to help them improve their scholarship opportunities. And if the student's not invested, then we can't do that. So it's a matter of trying to find motivation, through their parents. Police are going by right now. It's also a matter of trying to find within the student what motivates them. So I'm a big fan of getting them to colleges, having them see a college campus, and realizing like, oh, this is something I want for me. I'd rather not have them want it for their parents. If they want it for themselves, then they're going to be truly motivated. But I guess the short answer is it's impossible to work with zero motivation on the student's part. We can get like the minorest progress, but really the secret is to get them caring in one way or another.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I just know I've had that question asked a couple of times, and there are different ways to motivate students, and I agree, getting them onto the campuses and getting them excited about why they're taking this test. It's not just a test. There's a reason behind it, and so let's focus on that a little bit more.
Right.
So yeah, love it. So speaking of different students, I know you work with a lot of different populations of students, some of maybe the richest students and the poorest students in your area. So how does your experience working with those students differ?
It's so fascinating. I mean, we've had students from, the richest families in Los Angeles to the poorest families in Los Angeles. And the thing that strikes me is how ultimately similar they are. They have different opportunities and they have different sort of advantages in terms of their educational profile before they come to us. But their outlook is similar, and their ability is similar, and their motivation generally is similar too. I mean, a lot of kids come to us who are motivated, by the way. The kids we were talking about in the last segment, that's like, literally 1 or 2% of the students we ever see. And most kids are excited, and see this opportunity coming up, this, the college opportunity, and are motivated to make the most of it. So it really is a joy. I mean, I know that's like sounds like a cliche. It literally is a joy to help all of those kids to, better themselves, to better their circumstances directly by getting into colleges and getting scholarships. But even just to kind of take the next step in their lives and develop as individuals, it's just it's an honor to be a part of that and to be directly connected to them, whatever their background, regardless of their background, in fact.
Yeah, that's so true, and we see that a lot, and I try to share that with families, is that this isn't all just about getting into college and winning scholarships, and obviously that's what's really important, that's what they're coming to us for, but it really is about building those lifelong skills and those competencies and that confidence and things like that is kind of the more important behind the scenes goals that we're after.
I think when I was a kid, I don't think I even really realized that. I think I was thinking about the college application process as like a series of to jump through, and the people who got in were the ones who were the best hoop jumpers. And that's kind of true, but that's a really narrow way of looking at it, because ultimately your life and your kind of professional success will not be determined by how good you are at sort of meeting certain arbitrary standards. It'll be about how hard you work, how determined you are, and you can demonstrate that stuff and develop those skills at this stage for sure.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Okay, well, let's dig into the actual test prep and some advice and some things like that a little bit. So we talked about anxiety being a big struggle, and so do you have any tips for cultivating a positive mindset around test prep and performing well?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the first answer a bit. I mean, it's you want to, working backwards from like the ultimate outcome. The outcome we want to get to is student opens up a test and says, I know this, right? And I'm going to do my thing. So working backwards from that, that's being confidently prepared. And that confidence comes from knowing the material and having a strategy. So those two factors in combination, basically like having a plan, having a way of tackling the test, and then also knowing as much of the content as you possibly can. Those are the, there's a lot of stuff that goes into those two things, but ultimately those two factors are the keys.
Yeah, so when it comes to the mindset, it's really just more about being prepared, and so that will give the confidence. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I think that, and even having a plan, right? So for instance, once you've done the studying, once you've learned all the math concepts and the grammar rules, and once you know how to, work through the reading section and approach it the right way, then you get a good night's sleep the Thursday night before the test and the Friday night before the test, and you have a big breakfast on Saturday morning, and you bring a great snack with you, and you do all of those sort of like physiological factors. All of those things add up. All of those things become the confidence, basically. You're putting yourself in position to succeed. You even know that you're going to take, for most students, you're going to take the test multiple times. So you're taking that test the first time, and you're not thinking, oh, like I'm going to slack off and not do well on this, but you kind of reduce the pressure by knowing there is a second test down the road. And all of those things are part of just having a good plan. That's the secret. Be prepared, and you will feel confident. And when you feel confident, then you won't feel that acute anxiety.
Yeah, well, that's what we're all about, is being prepared. So I couldn't agree more with all of that. So let's talk worst case scenario. What if the student doesn't get that score that they need? Then what?
Well, okay. So do you mean doesn't get the score on a first test or on all of the tests?
Ooh. I don't know. Maybe they feel like the deadlines are fast approaching and they still don't have the score that they need. I mean, do you recommend just kind of keep studying and keep pushing forward, try something different? I mean, what's the strategy there?
Gosh, yeah, that's a really rich topic. That's a really, multi-layered, and I think every student would arrive at that situation in a different way, and how they would kind of extricate themselves from it would be unique too. So sometimes we take really, really practical strategies where, a student needs one particular thing, needs to get to one particular kind of score objective. And so we'll do, the essential work to get to that particular number, basically. And that's not my favorite way to do it, because it's not taking the test in a way that's like the most educational way. It's just like, let's game this test and get you to this certain level. So that's one way to do it, is just to take an absolutely practical approach. I think before you even get to the place where you could be excited about your score or disappointed by your score, you want to know what your appropriate outcome would be. So I've been in student situations where the kid comes to me and says, my goal is to get, so I'm going to convert an old SAT score. My goal is to get a 1450, my goal is to get a 1500 on the SAT and get into Columbia. And the student was starting out with something like a 1040, 1060 type score, right? And the most important thing at that moment was actually to say, hey, you know what? That's a really big jump. A lot of students, in fact, most students who do prep are not going to make a jump that big. So let's start by maybe adjusting the expectations or setting an intermediate goal first and saying, hey, you know what? Let's get to 1200 first. Once we get to 1200, let's try to get to 1300 from there. We'll see what we can do. Because that's sort of a reasonable set of expectations. If you have the goal of 1500 and you're starting at 1040, you're going to be disappointed, unless something really weird happened on the first test, and that did not represent your true abilities. That jump is, 4.5 standard deviations, and that's not something that happens every day. So I think having the right expectations is the key. If things didn't ultimately go as well as we wanted them to, if we have reasonable expectations and we didn't quite meet them, I think my advice to the student would be, this is going to work out. Even though you didn't get the number you necessarily wanted to, you would be shocked by the percentage of students who end up at a college that's just a really great fit for them. My personal example that sounds like, sort of a Crimea River story was, I really wanted to go to Harvard. I was just absolutely sort of single-minded about that. I got deferred on early action. I got waitlisted on regular admission. I went to Princeton instead. That's the Crimea River part. Yeah. I loved Princeton. I think it was a better place for me personally. I was more. It was more focused on undergraduate education. The classes were smaller. It was easier for me to get a sort of a focused education, and all my friends came from there now, and I wouldn't trade that experience. So I think that for 99 students out of 100, they end up at the right place for them, and that's the message I would share with them if they were to get to the end of the process and feel like they didn't get the number they wanted.
Yeah, it really does always work out.
It's remarkable. Yeah, it's cool.
So I think that's a great place to kind of start to wrap up. And so we always ask the same question. Do you have any other tips or tricks to help families on the college-bound journey?
Boy, I'm going to share kind of a hot one right now that I'm really excited about. So if there are any English language learners out there, I would really encourage you guys to apply for the EL supports that ACT is now providing. They have basically 50% extra time available to EL students. So if you're a non-native English speaker, get those supports, get that extra time. That's going to really boost your score. Beyond that, of course, I would pitch our ACT books and our ACT online course and our SAT books that are coming out later this year.
It's all non-boring.
It's all exactly. It's all non-boring, and it's all, basically everything that's in our books is my sort of distilled ideas of, the most essential, most valuable stuff you could learn for the test. So, I hate to be I don't want to be a shill because I don't like that, but I would love for people to check out our materials. And if you go to learn.tutorted.com, you can see a little bit of our online course and see if you think we'd be a good kind of teacher match for you.
Yeah. Well, I can speak from experience. I've gone through your sample, your free course, and it is definitely non-boring. And we've talked several times, and so I'll be sure to share a link when we post this, and so everybody can see your courses and see what they think and see if it's a good option for them. And you do ACT and SAT, is that right?
That's right. Yep, we do. Yeah, ACT, SAT subject tests. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll definitely share that. Well, thank you again for being here and talking test prep with me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Bye.